Excellent. Okay. So obviously, what you said at the beginning is right. That is, the conversation we had together gave you a certain kind of perspective on what's happening with you. So the incidence of you blaming yourself has really been impacted, at least temporarily. So that's what I'm getting from what you're saying, which is perfect. So just keep it in mind to always be on the lookout. What am I blaming myself for? What am I blaming myself for? Right? The moment you find yourself feeling bad about something, okay, stop right there and ask yourself, what did I just say about myself? What words did I just use, either about myself or about the situation? When something happens, you get sucked immediately into the conversation. You get that? The moment something happens, you immediately go into the space called there's something wrong here. But it happens so quickly that you describe it like you just did. You just made a distinction between the thought and then the situation. Yeah, it's the same thing. The situation happens, the situation is meaningless unless you give it the thought. So a thought is coming in and hijacking the whole situation. So even in those incidents, I want you to start practicing just noticing how, in fact, I can kind of conclude from what you just said, that when an incident happens to you, you conclude that it's out of your hands. You don't say, "Oh, I just had a bad thought." You say, "Oh, the situation is horrible." And so if you say the situation is horrible, what happens there is you've put yourself in a situation where you are a victim, 1,000%. A victim is someone who cannot do anything about what's happening. If we look at the second one, the thought one, the idea that you're having a thought and that the thought is causing you to feel this way, puts you back at least a little bit, but actually quite a bit, in the driver's seat again. Now, because you've said that, because you've said the thought is what's caused this, now you've given yourself the space to look at that thought and then to, by observing it and becoming aware of it, to counter it somehow. Because when you think of the thought and you think of what I just thought, at that moment you have the space to not think that. Does that make sense? So I'm going to write this down, that we need to constantly make the distinction between you making an interpretation that the situation is bad versus what I'm saying about the situation is what's causing its badness. Yep. So it's what you're saying about the situation that causes its badness. Yeah. But see, you didn't even overblow it. You weren't there to overblow it. It's an automatic reaction. You're unconscious in that moment. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You're not overblowing anything. You're just left with an overblown story or an overblown experience. Why? Because the moment the situation happened, you straight went into the meaning or the thought, and you were consumed by the thought. It's not like you saw the thought and you took it and you put it aside. No, you became the thought. And so this is a distinction you and I need to keep returning to. And this is exactly why one part of your homework was to do the meditation piece. It's not about doing it once. It's about actually beginning to do it consistently. I'll tell you exactly why. You see what we just did? Where we split between you concluding the situation is bad versus us saying that, no, it's the thought about the situation that brings about its badness. When you start meditating, what happens is it actually allows you to see the reaction as it comes into you. So you're faced with a situation, because you've been meditating, you've been slowing down the process of thinking and feeling in your meditation. Now when you're out there in the world, when you're actually experiencing the situation or a situation, what you'll notice is the process of you getting into the reaction is a lot slower. And so now you're able to not be a victim. Now you have a chance to say, what did I just say? And you have an opportunity to start beginning to notice the things you say that bring about the badness of the situation. Does that make sense? Right?
Yeah.
And now I'm saying all of this, and I don't want you to think like I'm saying it to you and khalas, you have to get it. No. It's a literal practice. Okay, you've been thinking like this for the longest time. The habits we have, the conditioning of thinking that we have, we've been practicing it for almost 40 years. That's tremendous. So what we're doing right now is the equivalent of us standing in the middle of a railway track with a train coming on to hit us.
Whoa.
And so you've got to give yourself some space to not be able to stop it for some time. But the way to gain power over that train is to start doing the work, specifically in this case, the meditations. Because what the meditations do, and I'm going to give you the scientific explanation, there's a network in your brain called the default mode network. That essentially is another way of saying your personality. So the habitual thoughts that come up for us from the moment we open our eyes in the morning to the moment we sleep at night. That network defines who we are. When you meditate, what you're doing is you're taking that baseline, which is your default mode network, and you're messing up with it. When you meditate, you start actually changing that baseline. So the habitual thoughts and feelings that make up that baseline begins to disappear, begins to shift. The feelings and thoughts actually begin to lessen and lessen to the point where they disappear. And so when you meditate, every time you get yourself into what's called the present moment, you're divesting your energy from the thought or the feeling that is very habitual for you. The act of noticing yourself going into your habitual thinking and then saying, no, I'm going to bring myself back to the moment, which is what the meditation is all about. That act itself begins to decouple the neural network that causes that feeling and that thought. So it's not something you can effort at, like, oh, I'm going to try my best not to see the situation like that. No, the train is coming. It's going to hit you. But what happens when you do the meditation, you're beginning to develop the strength, the muscle, to be able to hold your hand out and stop the train in its tracks. Because the meditation weakens the train. It weakens the velocity of the train. So it gets it to a point where you can actually stop it with your own one hand. So I'm spending a bit of time on this because this is all linked to the anxiety piece. It's linked also to your concern about public speaking as eloquently as you perceive the others to be. It's the way you see the situations that makes you anxious. It's what you say about it, and hence what you feel about it, that is the source of the anxiety. It's not the situation itself. If I took you out and I put someone else in your place who has a different default mode network, he's not going to react the same way you do. He reacts somehow differently because he doesn't have the triggers in his mind, in his brain, to react to that situation. So he doesn't have those thoughts and feelings that you do. I'm going to pause in a second, but I just want to tie it again. So your anxiety, your feeling bad about situations, all of this is tied to your feeling and thinking, full stop, the end. Your feeling and thinking is tied to your default mode network, full stop, the end. The way to disrupt the default mode network is to do the meditations and do them consistently. Full stop, the end. If you just take those 3 points and you keep them in your mind, I promise you, you're going to come to me soon and you're going to be like, Rafi, I saw the thought. Rafi, I felt the feeling come up. And Rafi, inside of that slowness of the thought and the feeling, I was able to observe it. And guess what? I wasn't able to completely stop it, but I was definitely able to lessen its impact on me. And that's a promise, by the way. So I'm going to pause here. I just want to, whenever I go on a spiel here, and I'm handing you a lot of stuff, and by the way, this will all be in your notes. I'll send them to you. I just want to pause and ask you, what are you getting out of this? What are the next steps that you have in your mind? What are you going to commit to?